Hey there, pals. Ever wondered which country is the most powerful in the world? Well, the answer is America. But how did they become so super strong? We'll figure it out today. First, you'd see that before the 1800s, India and China were the two biggest superpowers in the world. Most of the trade and economic activities revolved around India and China. Then, in just the last 100 years or so, the USA became the big cheese in the global economy. How did they do it? We need to dig into the past to find out. Now, when we look at the size of the US economy, it's way bigger than any other country. Their military budget is also huge, even bigger than the next 9 countries combined. They protect a bunch of countries around the world and have bases all over the place. So how did one country become so powerful? And why did they succeed while others like the British Empire didn't? Let's explore more in today's video. In 1492, an Italian explorer named Christopher Columbus found some islands in the Caribbean near North America. This event made Europeans aware of America, and they started to establish colonies there. Native Americans, also called Red Indians, lived in America at that time, belonging to different tribes. South America was mostly colonized by Spain, which is why many South American countries speak Spanish today. Around the 1600s, Britain established its first colony in America, and France also began to colonize the region. These 3 countries, Britain, France, and Spain, were the main powers in colonizing North America. Unfortunately, the Native American population declined by 80 to 90% in the years that followed due to various reasons, with the main one being diseases like smallpox and influenza brought by the European colonizers. Native Americans didn't have immunity against these diseases. Several decades later, on July 4, 1776, American revolutionaries declared their independence from Britain. This marked the birth of a new country, the United States of America. After 1850, America's influence started to grow on the world stage. This was a time when countries like Britain, France, and Spain controlled many territories around the world, including India, which was under British rule. Meanwhile, the United States was already a democratic nation, so if other countries considered aligning with a larger power, they often chose the USA. Why? Because the USA offered the promise of freedom and democracy, similar to what some of its own states were experiencing. For example, states like Florida, Illinois, and Ohio preferred to join the United States rather than remaining colonies of the Spanish or British empires. Texas, in 1836, had gained its independence from Mexico but faced ongoing troubles with Mexico. So, it chose to become part of the USA. Other states followed suit, and the United States kept growing. However, it's important to note that the USA wasn't entirely peaceful in its expansion. While it was a democratic nation, it also had ambitions to acquire more territory. In 1867, the USA purchased Alaska from Russia for $7.2 million, and it annexed Hawaii in 1898 after overthrowing the Hawaiian monarchy. Although the USA didn't consider itself a colonizer like Britain or France, its actions resembled colonial behavior in some cases. In 1898, the USA also annexed Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines from Spain, paying $20 million for the Philippines. Eventually, the Philippines gained independence in 1946. By the 1900s, the USA had become a large country with many territories, leading to a substantial economy and GDP share on the global stage. In short, after 1850, the United States became an attractive option for countries and territories seeking freedom and democracy, leading to its growth. However, its expansion also involved controversial acquisitions of land, resembling colonial behavior in some instances. This expansion contributed to the USA's significant share of the global GDP. But this was only the beginning. The real magic happened between 1900 and 1950. Do you remember what happened during these 50 years? There were 2 world wars. And where did these 2 world wars take place? This is a story that dates way back to 1940s, and by this time three things that happened. Number one, World War I had happened with all major empires dedicating all of their resources to war. Number two, in this process, the British Empire's debt shot up from £0.62 billion of debt in 1913 to £7.8 billion in 1930, which is from 25 of its GDP to 130 of its GDP. And just like the British Empire, while all other empires were fighting against each other, the United States did not participate in the war until the fact end and acted as a war merchant rather than a war participant. Now, what does this mean? While all the big empires were busy fighting and dedicating all of their manpower and resources to warfare, the United States used all of its capital and manpower into becoming a major supplier of cotton wheat, brass rubber automobiles, machinery, thousands of other goods. As a result, the United States experienced one of the greatest economic booms in the world. The total value of U.S. exports grew from just $2.4 billion in 1913 to $6.2 billion in 1917. On top of that, the export of metals, machines, and automobiles rose from just $480 million in 1913 to $1.6 billion in 1916. And same was the case with food exports, which climbed from $190 million to $510 million, and same was the case in World War II. Also, if you look at the charts, while the rest of the nations witnessed steep decline in their per capita GDP, the US actually saw a drastic increase in its per capita, crossing 10,000 per capita. Why? Because, again, they acted as war merchants until the Pearl Harbor incident happened. And more importantly, the war was not fought on their soil. So in all, by conducting a business out of two of the most expensive wars in world history, the United States made so much money that while every other country's economy was devastated, the US had 75% of the entire world's voluntary gold. And if you look at the graph, you'll see that their gold reserves went from just 2,000 tons in 1910 to almost 20,000 tons in 1914. So the question is, does this mean that the US became a superpower because of gold? Well, not really. Along with gold, they deployed. The United States became a superpower by making other countries depend on its help, being self-reliant, having a strong military, and teaming up with allies. After World War II, it helped rebuild countries like Germany and Japan and set up military bases there to keep things stable and increase its influence. This made the US really powerful on the world stage. After 1950, the United States and the Soviet Union became the two biggest and most powerful countries in the world, and this marked the beginning of the Cold War. The Cold War was not a traditional war with battles and fighting, but more of a conflict of ideas. It was like a battle between two different ways of organizing society, communism and capitalism. Instead of directly fighting each other, the USA and the Soviet Union fought indirectly in other countries. They did this by supporting different sides in conflicts in those countries. For example, if the USA thought that communism was becoming popular in a certain country, they might help the opposition by giving them money or supporting rebel groups. Sometimes, they even went as far as to assassinate leaders who were seen as communist threats, like what happened to Che Guevara in Bolivia in 1964. One well-known example of this indirect fighting was in Afghanistan, where the USA supported Taliban militants to counter the influence of the Soviet Union. This led to the rise of extremist groups, and we still see the effects of that today with terrorist organizations. Similar situations happened in many other countries like Brazil, Chile, Argentina, Iran, Congo, and the Dominican Republic. Because the USA interfered in the politics of so many countries, some of them became heavily reliant on the USA, making America even more powerful. This is why the USA now has more than 850 military bases in over 80 countries around the world. To maintain all of this influence during the Cold War, the USA had to spend a lot of money on its military, which is why it has the most powerful military in the world today. In 1949, the USA formed the NATO alliance with European countries to counter the influence of the Soviet Union. This alliance is still around today, and it has kept the USA closely connected to Western European countries. Many of these European countries depended on the USA for support because their own economies were struggling after World War II. This made the USA more powerful, but it also had some negative consequences. The USA also formed alliances like NATO to maintain its influence, especially in Europe. After the Soviet Union's collapse in the early 1990s, the United States became the sole superpower. But the international landscape has since become more multipolar, with the rise of other influential countries like China. America's rise as a powerful superpower was influenced by its geopolitical positioning and internal factors, notably its ability to attract talent through immigration policies and a culture that promotes innovation. The United States has historically welcomed immigrants from around the world, drawing in individuals with diverse skills and talents, and its merit-based immigration system has facilitated this. Its world-class educational institutions and support for research have allowed it to harness the potential of talented individuals, fostering innovation and entrepreneurship. Strong legal frameworks for intellectual property protection and access to abundant resources further bolstered its global influence. However, the future of America's superpower status will depend on various evolving economic, political, and social dynamics. But even after becoming such a powerful superpower, friends, what is the ground reality of a common American? The homeownership rate in America was only 65.8% in 2020. More than 30% of Americans do not own houses. America is one of the most unequal countries in the world. The top 1% of the people own 42.5% of the country's wealth. The healthcare system of America is very expensive and inadequate. The obesity levels have reached unthinkable highs in America. Many students can't afford their college tuition fees. A college education is so expensive in America that the student debts are in millions. Additionally, there are no proper gun laws in America. More than 600 mass shootings took place within a year in America in 2020. More than 3,000 people died because of it. Instead of spending so much on the military, had America spent the money on the development of its citizens, being a superpower might have meant something. Today, countries like Norway, Denmark, Sweden have surpassed America by a lot in terms of human development. But these countries are not known as superpowers. It may be because these countries aren't as powerful economically. Their military isn't as powerful, but for a common man to live his life is better in these Nordic countries in comparison to living in America. If there is any lesson in this video, it will be that a country should not strive to be a superpower. It should focus on making itself better. It should focus on improving the lives of its citizens. I hope you liked this informative video. If you liked it, then comment below. What other topics would you like to see videos on? Let's meet in the next video. Thank you.